Hey guys, and welcome to episode 125 of the OCD Stories.com podcast. And in this episode, I got on Kirsten Pagacz. Kirsten wrote the book Leaving the OCD Circus. Now, I got the pleasure of meeting Kirsten at the OCD conference in San Francisco last year. She introduced herself, so it was a pleasure to meet her. I'm always grateful when people introduce themselves because that saves me the anxiety of doing it myself. So maybe that's something I should confront. However, the book was a great read. She kindly sent me a copy, and it was great prep for this interview. So Kirsten not only wrote that book, but she's the founder of RetroAgogo.com, which is an online website selling sort of kitsch, gifts, and sort of knickknacks. So if you're into that sort of thing, go check them out there and show your support. So in this episode, we obviously talk about Kirsten's book. We break down her OCD story, you know, the struggle, the recovery, where she's at now, what's helped her, obviously exposure and response prevention therapy, medication, and all the other things that have helped her and continue to support her in her day-to-day life. So I put out various things from the book. We also talk about her newsletter called Soul Nutrients, which is bits and bobs of information that Kirsten finds useful, points of views, philosophies, and we break down a couple of those. So one was tips for choosing the path of wellness instead of illness. I found that quite interesting, and also recognizing illusion as illusion. We also talk about self-love, self-compassion. We talk about how the Chinese finger trap, the imagery of that relates to OCD, and sort of at the end of the book, Kirsten talks about, which has a Latin phrase, which is basically "let us live while we live," and I thought that was an interesting one because she talks about regret and the loss, the grief of loss, and I know Chrissy talks about this a fair bit. You know, people when they have OCD, they grieve the person that they never became, or that they lost, the time they lost, etc., the opportunities missed. And I wanted to get Kirsten to break down this point to help anyone listening who's maybe find themselves in that situation. And I believe Kirsten's answer was a very good one on addressing that. And then we talk about quotes. She puts them all throughout her book. I'm a big fan of quotes, so we break down kind of a couple of her favorites and what they mean to her. She talks about nature, exercise, animals, all key things in her kind of mental well-being. She name drops quite a few people, which is awesome, so I'm going to link all of that in the show notes so you can find that out there. But yeah, it was just a real pleasure to talk to Kirsten. She's a fascinating lady, really nice energy. So yeah, it was great to be around her, and I hope to see her soon. So as always, don't forget, if you want to become a member of the show, get more episodes and more, head over to theocdstories.com/join. That's theocdstories.com/join. But without further ado, here is Kirsten. On the podcast today, I have Kirsten Pagacz, who is the author of the book Leaving the OCD Circus. Welcome to the show, Kirsten.
Hello, Stu. Thank you so much for having this time with me.
Absolutely. It's good to have you on. And obviously, we met at the ICF conference last year. So I appreciate you coming to say hi, which is obviously the starting block to this conversation. So it's good to have you here.
Well, wonderful. And thank you again for the opportunity.
No, anytime. So, as you know, what we always do on this show is kind of hear about your OCD story. So it'd be good to go into as little or as much detail as you want to give.
Okay, wonderful. OCD came into my life when I was 9 years old, and I came from a pretty chaotic childhood background. My father was a very heavy narcotics user, was divorced from my mother. My mother worked all of the time because she was supporting 3 kids. I was the youngest. So there's many times, when I was quite young that I was letting myself in and out of the house and feeling scared, just like little kids do when they're by themselves. And so when OCD kind of came to me, in a way, it gave me some structure and some stability because I could count to a certain number, tap to a certain number, and it gave me a sense of control, and it gave me a sense of order. And I really liked it. And I didn't know what I was doing. I did not know that I had OCD. I just thought that I kind of had this private friend, and he would ask me to do these tricks and do things in a very certain way. And if I accomplished whatever it was that privately was set out for me, then I could kind of move on to the next second of my life. And I did not realize that something was slowly creeping, working its way into my well-being and my mind and my spirit and soul. I just thought, oh, this is interesting. I kind of have this piece in my head that I kind of talk to and perform for. And at first it was very benign and kind of comfortable until it got not benign, and until the claws came out with the illness and the fangs came out, and I went for a real wild ride that my OCD really escalated. And no longer was it a friend, it was literally, I was fighting for my life to just get through every day. And running two different courses, one of being a student or a daughter or a girlfriend, and the other one was managing and coping and trying to get this voice in my head to lower the boom and be kinder. And the only way to get this thing that was lunging at me, critiquing me, and being so mean was to do my compulsions and service the OCD, almost feed the monster so the monster doesn't keep yelling at me. And I had no idea that that was the exact opposite thing of what I should be doing. But the loops of the compulsions and the obsessions became very much nonstop. I classify myself as a checker, but also as a perfectionist. And then my OCD has morphed over the years and shown its head in many different ways. I had a complete mental breakdown collapse when I was 32. I was undiagnosed, so I had no idea what was driving me to madness and having to service this monster. And what I like to say is that there were no more normal seconds, that because it came into my life like a big, huge ink, spill on the counter, it spreads out and spreads out and spreads out until the whole counter is filled with ink. So I had no more normal seconds, and had a collapse in the middle of a street in California when I lived there at the time. And this is when my husband and I knew something was going on. We didn't know what it was. We had never heard the two words, obsessive compulsive strung together, but we knew something very large and bigger than I was, or that he was, really was behind the wheel of the car of my life. And I was just going for a wild ride. And that's what made me say, I really need help. I can't manage this. I can't be a split personality anymore. I'm very ill. I'm very sick. And because of kind of hitting ground zero, that's what made me say, I can't go on unless I do get help. And that's what opened up that opportunity for me.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And I really like the ink metaphor. I think that's a really good way of looking at it. So when you got to that point where you kind of said, right, enough is enough, what was your first kind of step to figuring it all out?
Well, the very first step was having admission to myself that I truly had a problem that was out of control and causing me great agony and my loved ones agony as well, and saying something is wrong. Because my OCD, I was always trying to make things right, and I was always trying to be perfect and really hit the high bar. And so saying, hey, I'm not even close to the high bar, I'm a complete mess wreck, I cannot function, that was very hard for me to come to terms with. But what I came to terms with was reality, and saying I can't exist having two different, splits in my life. I want to be one person. And whatever that takes, I'm going to figure this out and get better.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. And it is kind of like living a double life. I remember as a kid thinking kind of that I was some sort of superhero because I had this kind of Clark Kent type thing where everyone saw me as one thing, but I realized something was very different, maybe wrong in another part of me, which was, and I had to keep it a secret because I didn't want to, be locked away. That was the kind of stigma I had as a young child. So I had to, with my life, protect this secret. So I felt like a really bad superhero.
I understand. I understand completely. And what you had talked about, the keeping it a secret, I think so frequently with all kinds of abuse is when it is being kept a secret, that's when it has so much power. And keeping something a secret, whatever kind of abuse that it is, there's a lot of work and effort to try to keep a hush-hush on something with a very loud voice.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So how did you figure out it was OCD?
Well, Doug, my husband, and I realized we did not have a name for what was going on. And throughout my life, I knew something was wrong, and I would go to the library and I would look up different medical conditions. So I would look up schizophrenia. Maybe that's what I am. And I could relate to some things, but I'd say, oh, that's not quite it. Then I'd read up on bipolar, and I'd say, well, yeah, I kind of can relate to some of it, but that's not quite it. And it sounds silly now because OCD is so much in the common vernacular, and, even the show Monk on TV or whatever, there's so much more information. At this particular time, there wasn't. And if there was, I never stumbled upon it. And so we needed to identify what was going on, and I think having a name for it had so much to do with saying, okay, we need to take the next step. And luckily, my husband listened to NPR many, many moons ago, and there was a public service announcement from the International OCD Foundation. And I was at work at the time, just barely hanging on. And the question was, do you or someone that you know suffer from, and then they went on to describe obsessions and compulsions. And Doug had his eureka moment. He's like, oh my gosh, that sounds like what we're dealing with. So he was very excited when I came home to say, hey, I heard this on NPR. There's something called obsessive compulsive disorder. And this is what they said. And I started crying and becoming so emotional because finally we had some kind of clue as to what was holding me hostage. And in the PSA, they said, if you do need help, there is help available in your area, and call this 800 number. And so I called the number, and a very lovely gentleman in my area made himself quickly available for me to go in and see him. And to this day, he is a very good friend, a wonderful mentor, and I owe so much to him picking up the phone and being so loving and so kind when I did meet him in his office. And he said that obsessive compulsive disorder is a real medical condition. I had no idea. And what he said that blew me over was that it wasn't my fault. And I had always felt that everything was my fault because I wasn't good enough. And when he said it's not your fault, it was as though all these heavy pounds of wet sand got lifted. And because of that, I cried my eyes out because I was able to let my ill self be seen. And I was trying to hide it so desperately for so many years. So I was raw and I was vulnerable. And to this day, I so appreciate that he was so kind and so wonderful and handed the Kleenex to me and just let me cry my eyes out. And I didn't feel judgment. I didn't think he thought I was really weird. I felt his support from his soul, his mind, and his heart immediately. And because that was such a safe place for me, that's really when the healing very initially started to happen.
Yeah, that's and just the simple act of him, as you said, listening and responding kindly is such a simple thing to do. And I feel when we as humans can do that for one another, you know, your story is testament to how powerful that is. Okay, so that's awesome. And then from there, did he recommend a therapist or medication or anything like that?
Well, he was a therapist,
Okay.
and so he recommended that we start meeting and kind of beginning the very basic steps of starting to understand OCD and do the different things like exposure therapy and things with him. However, when I was ready to try medication, which at first I was like, no. I'm going to do this just on my own. I don't need medication. I'll follow his lead of what he's doing, and I should just be able to get better by myself. And then it became apparent that even though I was getting a lot better, I was still getting mentally stuck more frequently than I knew a healthy person would or does. And so he had a psychiatrist that he worked with that actually prescribed the medication. So I went in and talked to him, and that's when I started the medication program. However, continued to see the therapist for behavior and all of those things.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. And I guess how long did it take for you to really see some changes in how you were feeling and I guess behaving in terms of compulsions?
Well, if I could go back a little bit.
Yeah, of course.
Because I think this is so important in so many things in life, whether you have OCD or whatever is standing in your way, whatever, you know, is that big, huge boulder that's in front of you, preventing you from moving forward in a healthy direction, whatever that is, that I had in my mind been so abused by this condition and so torn apart and just ragged on that I was a victim. And I felt like a victim, and I felt very weak, and I did not feel like I could assert myself. I was really used to cowering in a corner, kind of with OCD just beating me with a stick, until I finally gave in and did the compulsion just to have my OCD back off a little bit. And I was victim. And when I was with my doctor, and he had commented, he had said, you know, what did you, you know, give me a little lowdown about your life. And I explained that I finished 4 years of college and I had a successful job and I did all these things. And he said, well, how do you feel about being so successful? Because you just used 10% of your brain power. The other 90% was dedicated to being compliant to your illness. And it was at that moment, Stu, that I went from I'm a victim, I'm suffering, I'm being abused, to, oh my God, I'm being robbed. I have been robbed of that other 90%, and whoever or whatever is taking this away from me, no more. And it was literally a moment where I said, I am doing a paradigm shift. I am moving from victim, because I will not be able to get out of my tight gilded cage with my illness if I am a victim. The only way I can do this is if I become a warrior. And I decided in that moment that whatever it took, I was going to shift and I was going to fight like a mofo to get myself out and get myself better and, you know, really get that 90% back that had been stolen and robbed from me. I thought, this is such an unjust illness. It's taken away joy. It's taken away life. It's taken away my peace of mind. You know, enough is enough. And so I was ready to fight like I said, just really go for it, because I really didn't see any other options at that point.
Yeah, no, that's a powerful place to be, that kind of, that A, I've had enough, and B, no more. I'm going to find a way, whatever it takes. So yeah, it's great that you hit that point where you were like, yeah, I'm going to find a way. And obviously you did. Hence the book and our conversation now. So that's awesome. So, yeah, where we're at with the therapy. Yeah, so how long did it take to kind of start to see? Because obviously now with that mindset as well, on top of whatever the therapist is working with you on, how long does it take?
Well, I'd say within the first couple of months, he had me doing homework and recording all of the time that I was obsessing, and then what I did as my compulsion, and really kind of take notes on myself to see clearly how much of my time in my life was dedicated to serving this illness. And so that happened pretty quickly, that I said, okay, I'm on board here. I see this as a real problem, and I'm going to dial up and do whatever I need to get better. And I would say, not like it was a remedy or a cure by any stretch, but I'd say within the first month, I started to go, you know what? I'm kind of making some strides. And you know what? I am kind of saying no to my OCD. And I started to kind of feel like I was getting some notches in my belt of fighting power, because I did not always just go and do what my OCD told me to do. For instance, I would have a very hard time leaving a message at work because I thought I was saying defamatory things and that I was going to get fired. So I would listen to the message and listen to it, and I would say, okay, no, this is a good message, it's good, it's clear, it's pointed, it's what it needs to be. And then my voice would say, well, what if, though, you didn't hear it right? And what if you really called your boss, blah, 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 blah. And so instead of listening to a pre-recorded message 25 times, I brought it down to 10 times, and then I brought it down to 5 times. And then there became a point where I said, you know what? This is fighting for that 90%. And the only way to do it is to leave this gosh darn message and just hang up. And if I said something defamatory or terrible to my boss, and my boss fires me because of it, then so be it, because I chose wellness instead of illness. And the more I chose wellness over illness, the quicker the recovery and the healing began. And it was truly choosing one way over the other way.
Yeah, I love that. And acceptance commitment therapy, they talk about the choice point, that you at any given moment you have a choice, and you can either choose to move towards what you want or away from it.
And how simple that is and sounds, but what a revolutionary thought that's so life-changing.
Yeah.
That we really have the power of free will to make choices. And I think the illness says, you have no choice. You're my slave. You're going to do this and that. And when you start to exercise, wait a second, I do have some free will. And wait a second, I can kind of access this and get a little bit of my brain juice back. That's when you can really start making progress as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And like you said, at first people may feel, I don't have a choice, I can't do anything about this, etc., etc. But that's the kind of OCD talking through them, I believe. It's and I think, doing that first step of ERP is that when you have that moment of resisting and then the anxiety comes down, that's that learning of, that bad thing didn't happen. I can't give reassurance, or even if it did, it didn't really matter, etc., etc. But it almost takes that plunge, that leap of faith to test out the waters, to get that learning, to realize actually I do have a choice. It just feels horrible sometimes making that choice.
Yes, absolutely. And I think OCD is wicked like that, because you do feel horrible when you're not servicing your OCD. You can really get beat on.
Yeah.
And And it's so counterintuitive because you want the beating to stop, and to make the beating stop, you do whatever it is that's being demanded of you. And to say, wait a second, this is going to be a new program. I'm not going to operate like this anymore. And when you do start exercising your free will, it's kind of like, wait a second, I just did that. Like I did something I thought I wasn't capable of, and I just did it. And it's almost like I wanted to just quietly tiptoe away from the experience because I didn't want to wake up my inner monster and have him become aware that I was doing all these things without his approval, per se.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. All right. So, so you saw some good progress fairly on, which is awesome. So beyond sort of obviously medication and exposure and response prevention, was there anything else that has really helped you, whether that's, I guess, working hard on your business or, exercise or nutrition or meditation or anything like that?
Actually, there are many things that I have in my arsenal or my toolkit that I utilize to try to keep myself clear-headed, mindful, as peaceful as I can be, and have balance, and really do allow myself to kind of live in a range instead of living in a very black and white world. So when OCD really turned into a knock you down eating disorder, I had to weigh a certain number. And then once I got to that number, then I had to bring my weight down and was just about ready to be put into the hospital. And now I say, you know what? I don't need to be a number. And it was terrible because I had a digital scale. So I was weighing myself not only by pounds, but by ounces. And when you jump on the scale, you might get 0.3 one jump, and then you do it again and you're 0.4. So it was just like completely servicing my madness. But I think now learning that there's a range and that I don't have to be perfect. And if I can be somewhere in, a 90 to 100, then, hey man, I'm doing really good. But allow myself the slack that I might have a real crappy day, or I might get very stressed or anxious, and I may go back to having some OCD and compulsions, and I go, yep, I know exactly where I am. And just being able to reroute myself and get myself out, I think is part of what helps. Is saying, hey, wait a second, I'm the driver. My illness is in the sidecar, not the other way around. So as the driver, what am I going to choose to do? Am I going to react and totally fall apart because things are not perfect? Or do I say, you know what? Nothing really is perfect. Relax a little bit, not get so worked up, and just let life be. And one of the things I had a hard time with was things being as is. I always felt I should be correcting and making things perfectly tight and folded corners and a pretty little bow on top. And sometimes, life is like, I was thinking about this the other day, when you fold one of those sheets, the fitted sheets, and you want to fold the fitted sheet and make it look really nice and turn into a square. And no matter what you do with the fitted sheet, it's always kind of a bunchy little clump. Yeah. And that's kind of like life. Not everything is going to be a perfect little square with tight little corners. Even though my OCD says, yes, that's the life you want, go for it. I go, wait a second, though. That's like way too much to put on anybody's back to try to have all of life be like this. It is like the fitted sheet that's kind of bunchy, and you do the best with it that you can. And then there's a point where you just put the damn thing away and put it in the closet and let it be.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Yeah, and those fitted sheets are a nightmare. But yeah, I think that's a great way of looking at it. So, in your, where was it? That was it. One of your Soul Nutrients newsletters, you wrote a letter to OCD. And at the end you said, and I'm going to quote you here, you said, I am built for love, and I am built for purpose, and I am finding my way. Yes, I am certain that it will get lonely sometimes without you, but I would rather stand naked and vulnerable by myself than in your jurisdiction of maddening illusions any minute longer, or a minute longer. I just really like this, and it kind of struck me of that. Actually, I won't explain my take on it, but it'd just be good to get your, what that means to you.
Well, because OCD took up so much of my life and my mind, I really had a relationship with OCD, even though it was not a good relationship. That was kind of who I was hanging out with. And so when you say, hey, I'm going to break up with you and not hang out with you anymore, even though it's the best thing to do, there is almost a sense of loss because something large is going away, or it's your hope to send it away. And there is a feeling of loss, and there's also a feeling of, gee, I turned my abuser in. My dad was a sexual predator, for lack of a better word. And it's hard to turn a parent in and say, this is what's happening. And you feel like I'm not a good daughter if I expose him. I'm not working for him. I'm not doing well. So there's almost like you've been complying for OCD for so long that when you really let it down and say, hey, you're no longer an authority, and hey, I'm showing you the curb. For me, it was hard to make and allow that complete separation.
Yeah. I like that. That's a really good way to look at it. It's like it's a hard breakup, but it's one that's necessary for your own health and well-being.
Sure.
And I think that it struck me because it was, you're saying it's a choice you have to make, but you're not saying it's an easy one. You're saying, I would rather stand here naked and vulnerable than spend a second longer with you. And that's, I think, what it can feel like sometimes, right? Leaving OCD is, it's scary not to do those compulsions or answer your brain. But right there, you've made that choice.
Well, it's kind of like, I've been in unhealthy relationships before, and if the person on the other side isn't willing and able to leave, sometimes you have to make the hard decision and be the one to say goodbye. Yeah. And with OCD in its very basic nature is not going to say, hey kid, it's been fun hanging out with you and harassing you and torturing you, but I'm going to hit the high road. OCD just plans to stay for the long haul and the long run, and it's kind of like, what, you're leaving me? And it is like having to separate yourself from a negative, toxic relationship.
Yeah.
And that's really what I had going on with my mental illness. Sure, it was protecting me from real feelings or being in the moment, but taking away real feelings and moments, that's like your worst enemy on the planet doesn't have that kind of power. So to give something to your mind that kind of power to just rain on every parade, you got to say goodbye. You got to say no more. You're getting out of here. Thanks, but no more.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you kind of start to, I guess, turn your back on OCD, whether that's through medication, therapy, making choices, etc., OCD is probably going to shout louder and it's going to scream because it wants you to do the compulsion because it's ultimately trying to help you. It's just not helping you. And I think that's an important one, that as you do start to get on that journey of recovery, it may scream louder, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's not working. It just means OCD's terrified itself.
Yes, and I think in metaphors a lot and analogies and so forth, and I was learning about teeth. And when a tooth is about to die and the root is about to die, that's when it does its largest call out and really puts you in excruciating pain because it's on the way out. It's going to die. So it doesn't die like, oh, hey, I'm just going to duck my head and call it a day. OCD goes, you're doing what? and then really gets, raving mad. And it's so easy to find it just too unbearable to do it. But I'm a huge advocate of press and push your way through the pain so you can get to a better place.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so on the soul nutrients theme again, I know you got a couple coming up. One is, you've actually mentioned this a bit already, but tips for choosing the path of wellness instead of illness. It'd just be good if you could share a little bit of a taster of what that will be.
Sure. So going back to having balance be what you're going for instead of servicing your OCD, to be balanced, there's many things that you can do to kind of help yourself get into a groove, get into a more peaceful state of mind, one that's not bridled with anxiety. And I find things like spending time with nature incredibly valuable. We just moved, and we have a river in our backyard. And sometimes if I'm feeling anxious, I just go down to the river and I stare at the fish or feel the current splashing around or watch the little ducks or whatever. And the next thing you know, I'm kind of out of my mind and out of my anxiety and really present with the universe. So nature is such a great gateway to help yourself get to a more stable mental and physical position. And then also eating, when you do eat real crappy, you're going to feel real crappy. If you do hang out with people that are relentlessly negative, you're going to start to feel some of that. So really being aware and saying, hey, I want to hang out with joyful, peaceful, loving, wonderful people. I want to make time for nature. This is important to me. I feel a lot better when I go to the gym. So am I trying to, have a super body and enter a competition? No, but I do know that getting my heart rate up and putting some effort forth, kind of moving myself around, I feel better. And I say, what are those things I can do so I feel better? And when I do that, I have so much more to give to everybody else. If I'm cranky and haven't eaten and haven't slept and just been at the computer, I'm not as good as I can be to everybody else that's around. And animals. I love animals, and they are so unconditionally loving. To look in the eyes of an animal, whether it's a horse or a dog or whatever, you can feel such connection and such love, and there really is no room for OCD in any of that.
Yeah, no, I really love that. And the nature thing's a big one for me. Like you said, the running water, natural running water is one of the greatest anchors I've found to pull myself into the here and now, because there's so much going on, the movement of it, the sounds, as you say, it hits the rocks, fish, if there's fish there. There's just something about it. If you give it enough time, obviously probably not if you're in the height of an OCD spike, but generally speaking, if you just got some anxiety, I've found it to be quite a good anchor for me. And yeah, animals is a big one. Interestingly, I'm looking at doing an episode on horses and OCD soon.
Yes.
Not horses with OCD, I should say. But
you know what though? I bet there are horses with OCD. Yeah, I don't dogs. Know. Because it's kind of like we each get our own unique affliction, and so it would make perfect sense that an animal would have some kind of mental hiccup. The other thing too that I'd like to mention is when I lean into nature, then it kind of guides me out of myself. And a lot of OCD and anxiety is kind of me feeling inside of my own trap. And when I'm with nature and I'm watching the geese, or we spotted an eagle, when I see them, there's something so majestic and so big and so powerful and so much more gigantic and important than whatever issues I'm having, just their presence, or even not to be silly, but we also have big, huge trees that have been here for hundreds and hundreds of years, and I just feel their sage-like quality and their healing nature. And there is something to go hug a tree because, trees are there for you as well.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. And yeah, I see that when I see a big tree. I think this tree's been here before me and it's going to be here long after I'm gone. And there's something very humbling about that.
Yes, and it's almost like you want to pay homage and say thank you to the things that were here before you and are going to be here after you, and whatever fit you might be having with yourself, that is going to fade away and it is going to go. And sometimes not taking yourself so seriously that every moment has to be a big, huge deal. Kind of getting more in the groove of just things being, because the ducks aren't, trying to organize cans on a shelf or whatever. They're just doing their thing. And I think when you as a human can just kind of do your thing and not be so confined, that's when you can really get in your groove. And I think when you get in your groove, you can find your peace. And that's really what all of us OCDers want. We do all these nutty things to try to get peace of mind and try to get calm. And sometimes just saying bye, OCD, and letting yourself be available to the moment or the water or the horse or the tree is so comforting and like talcum to the soul, instead of OCD, which I say is more like a battery acid to the soul. So doing those things where you say, you know what? I love myself. I'm going to choose some talcum. I don't wish to be burned right now with my anxiety. So I'm going to make a shift here, and I'm going to choose things that are expansive and choose things that equal wellness and love and joy over the other route of what my OCD has in store for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And yes, it's good to see that kind of idea of choice coming back in. And yeah, I think that's a powerful one. Okay, so the next soul nutrients was the new one, is recognizing illusion as illusion. It'd be good to get an idea of what that's about.
Oh my gosh, this is, I find, so important because OCD, its job is to create a fear that what you're experiencing is really real, and that you should be gosh darn fearful that you left a horrible message and you are going to be fired, or you left a note that was defamatory and now you're going to be killed. And so you're very fear driven, and that fear is really coming from whatever illusion you're agreeing with. And I was recently, for my business, I did a podcast at a haunted house. And at the haunted house, it was closing, it was closed, and it was just myself and the creator, and we were talking about the business. And he said, hey, it'd be kind of funny. I don't have all my actors here, and I don't have everything in place, and my creepy music and my smoke and all this, but I can walk you through it. And you can see, and I can tell you about all these different things that are going to be in each room. So he fabricates and creates this experience that, ratchets people's pulse up and gets them sweating and screaming. And that, to me, I don't have any interest in. So I do have interest in, like, hey, let me go and see the inner workings. And I was thinking, wow, I'm behind the scenes of him creating all of these illusions. And I think with OCD, when you start to learn and evolve, you kind of get behind the scenes of it, and you see, you know what? OCD is kind of like the Great Oz. And I was believing, oh, this big scary monster. And it's just a little thing, running a projector on a very big screen. And the different things that were at this haunted house, he had put in place to scare people so they feel that they got their $20 worth or whatever. And I was thinking, you know what? That's what OCD does. OCD creates a haunted house where you're scared and fearful and jumpy and nervous. And it's all because he or she is a master craftsman of creating some illusion that you're buying into. that I'm buying into. And different things work on different people. So this haunted house might scare the living bejeez out of somebody, but maybe it's something else that's going to scare the next person, which is, oh my gosh, I find a spider on my desk or whatever. And it's just giving it all this power that it's bigger than you, when in actuality, it's like the Great Oz, just creating this universe that's an illusion that we buy into, and we say, yes, this is reality, where in reality, it's not. It's really your illness creating a very special, custom-made haunted house, if you will, for you. And it's an illusion.
Yeah, that's really powerful. And I think there's so much power to doing your research in terms of reading, in terms of I guess listening to this podcast, chatting with others of OCD, chatting to different therapists or your own therapist, and getting a real behind the scenes look as you got on that ghost tour. And, you know, sometimes, I mean, I hope this podcast is interesting to people and entertaining at times. But I know reading cannot be fun for a lot of people, but I think it's so important to get that, to understand the workings and mechanics of OCD. And when you do, like you said, you know, that you get behind that tour and you see it for what it is, as an illusion. And that helps you kind of break that cycle a bit more, because you can start to see OCD's tricks and workings, whereas otherwise you probably wouldn't be able to before.
Yes, and I think walking around with a magnifying glass, you know, imaginary, that when you're triggered, instead of, cowering and feeling anxious, it's like, I want to look right at that. What is that that's making me fearful? What's going on here? And it's almost when you step up with your shoulders back and a little bit of, you know, chutzpah, that you make your OCD back down, not the other way around. So instead of going, I have this trigger, I need to do these things, I'm like, wait a second, why do I keep going back to this? What learning is here? What's the opportunity here? What do I need to understand from this? And being willing to observe yourself as you go, but without getting too, you know, in yourself. It's kind of again, back to that balance. You're aware of what's going on, but at the same time, you're also living and being in the moment. So it's a real tricky place to get to, but just like learning everything, I am a firm believer that you can learn your way out of your OCD cage. And learning is one of the huge tools in the toolbox. And the learning doesn't stop. It's not like I stop seeing my doctor and, okay, I'm done learning, I know all there is to learn. Just like I stay thirsty in quest for knowledge in life, I stay thirsty in quest for knowledge in OCD.
Yeah, really good way of looking at it. And I think that comes back to earlier, your attitude of, I'm going to find a way, I'm going to work this out. And I think that hunger kind of leaves no stone unturned, so to speak. Okay, so are there any other soul nutrients that you want to discuss?
Actually, yes. And if I could elaborate a little bit about why I'm saying soul nutrients and the significance of that, is my experience with my OCD, which was a mental abuser, was that I experienced a lot of soul loss. Being around my father, unsupervised, there was a lot of soul loss. And I think you need to have a fully operating, functional soul to kind of help you move through your life. And when you've suffered soul loss, it's really kind of hard to get in your groove, because you are broken and you are dealing with all this deep set pain. So when I was starting to feel better and feel more well, and feeling like I had gathered some information about my journey, I was at an antique store. That's something that my husband and I do frequently, is go to estate sales or antique stores or things like that. And I've collected over my journey of complete illness to wellness all of these different pieces of ephemera that have some kind of impact and meaning to me. So I'll have a picture and it'll be like, oh, this is what my fear looks like. Or a peaceful picture is like, oh, this is what my peace looks like. And I kind of made this collection. And when I saw this particular writing, I was very quiet, just having a moment, reading this. And I thought, oh my God, this is what I'd love to share with every person that has OCD, because you really don't feel like you're good enough or right enough or well enough or whatever. And so the name of this stew is called Something Good. And I consider this a soul nutrient that if your listeners need a little soul nutrients, I say really open your ears, your heart, and your mind, because this is such a lovely gift. I'm reading it, but somebody else wrote it. And it's just a soul nutrient that is very near and dear to my heart. It's called Something Good. Wouldn't this old world be better if the folks we meet would say, I know something good about you, and then treat us just that way? Wouldn't life be lots more sunny if we praise the good we see? For there's such a lot of goodness in the worst of you and me. Wouldn't it be nice to practice just this way of thinking too? You know something good about me, and I know something good about you.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I guess, sorry. Oh, joking. I had a cough in. I didn't want to cough during you reading that. So what does that, why did it hit you so hard? What did it mean to you specifically?
Well, there's so much forgiveness in that writing. And oftentimes with illness, you do feel lumpy and bumpy and not quite right or whatever it is that you're contending with. And this one says, hey, take a load off. Everything's good. You're okay. I see the goodness in you. I see your promise. And I see that, yes, you have vulnerabilities, but you're okay. And even in the very worst of you, there's still good. And I think you really lose your self-confidence when you're being abused, whatever kind of abuse. And so this is kind of a little soul nutrient, if you will, to kind of say, hey, you might be suffering, but here's a little vitamin that someone wrote a long time ago, and I want to share it. And I think in my book, what I did is I collected so many pieces of ephemera that when I laid them all out and saw a huge heaping pile of pieces of paper and postcards and so forth, I thought, you know what, there could be something here that I can share to help somebody else out of their particular OCD prison. And one of the ways out of prison is to feel like your soul is getting nourished.
Yeah, I love that. And it's kind of, like you said, that even in your worst, whether that's when you're really struggling with OCD, that you're worthy of love.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And even though you might be having, a lousy day or challenges or whatever, that soul nutrient is kind of like when you look in an animal's eyes and they look at you with such love and such gentleness and acceptance.
Yeah.
And love and gentleness and acceptance, that is kind of the foundation of a soul nutrient. And when I write the soul nutrients, I tried to write newsletters, and it just reminded me of my corporate life. And I thought, I'm really not a good newsletter writer. But I was like, you know what, though? I can share soul nutrients, and that's something that I can give freely that could really give someone a little extra something to make them feel better.
Cool. No, absolutely. And I'll put a link in the show notes to that. Okay, so no, thank you for going into that. That was nice. So we've loosely talked about your book. But I guess how would if someone came to you and said, "Tell me about your book," how would you kind of describe it?
I would say that the book is a half memoir because I felt I needed to share who I was and get really real and expose myself. And so memoir, so who the heck am I? What's my my OCD story or my story. And then I thought, well, I don't want to end it with just a memoir because I can share a whole bunch of information, but is that really going to be helpful to the reader? And some people can relate to it or say, gee, this is similar to me or a new way to look at things. But I wanted to kind of give it a little bit of an eclectic twist and also make it a self-help book because I really wanted anybody that gives me their time and reads my book, I want them to walk away with something valuable. And so I took and distilled all of the things that I read, all of my doctor's visits, my exposure therapy, and I said, if I could distill this into something that could be of service and be good to someone who's suffering or a loved one who's trying to understand OCD better, then I need to make it twofold. I need to make it a memoir and a self-help book. And it's kind of a hybrid, if you will, and publishers often don't like hybrids. They want this is a this is a that, and things to go in their categories. And when I was communicating, I just expressed the importance of both kind of coming together in the book format.
Yeah, no, I think it works. Like I said, I read it in prep and I really liked it. And as I said before this call, the imagery and the artwork really adds something to it. So towards the very end of the book, kind of a spoiler for anyone, well, not a spoiler because it doesn't spoil the story, but it spoils the last page of the book. But I wanted to share it because I feel there's an issue many people face. So you write, it's time to avenge what you have lost. Dum vivimus vivamus, which is Latin for let us live while we are alive. Now my question is to do with that is, many people feel regret and sadness around the years lost to OCD, and you've touched on this already. But I guess how have you dealt with that? The quality of years you lost to OCD. How have you kind of, I guess, come to terms with it and looked for the opportunity in that?
It's sort of this is what is. I suffered from extreme OCD. It was incredibly debilitating. I made a lot of bad choices. I suffered greatly. I was not my best with other people. And that was then. And this is now. And I don't want to have any more abuse. And I want my life to be purposeful and filled with joy and good. And I don't want it to be of pain and loss. And if I stand and I look and go, oh, so painful, so much loss, OCD really robbed me. Well, isn't OCD robbing me again? So it's saying, you know what, that was then, babe, and this is now. And there's a new sheriff in town, and hell or high water, I'm going to stay in the driver's seat. I'm not going to be the whooping boy in the corner, cowering and being fearful to the next moment because of a big mental bully. Sure, that happened. Yes. Did it rob me of many years? Are there things that I would have done differently? Absolutely. But I do have now, and I can harness now, and I can extract and give to this moment my very best. And truthfully, my very best doesn't include OCD taking the driver's seat and grabbing the wheel. My best in living the life I want to live is really making sure that OCD stays in the sidecar and I remain the driver. And so that's the position, and that's how I choose to go forward.
Yeah, no, I love that. And is that kind of I've suffered enough, and it's maybe I can't change or control what happened then, but now as you said, I'm in the driver's seat. I have the control, and it's up to me whether I continue to suffer. And I guess a therapist can help as well. Work through some of that regret and grief, and around OCD.
Well, one thing I would like to add, if I may, is Jeff Bell has the adversity to advocacy. And that route is so point point on that you can be having a life of adversity, but you can also turn it into advocacy. And there's such a beautiful group of people that have suffered from OCD that are doing so much better, that are offering wonderful insight or strategy or websites or newsletters or whatever, to try to help other people that are suffering. And so I really think there's a strong, and Stu, what you do as well, you are dedicating yourself to be an advocate and to show people, hey, there's a different way to live your life. And instead of just saying, hey, I'm better, so see y'all later, bye, thanks, you go, wait a second, maybe if I stand here and share a little bit, maybe I can help my fellow brother or sister. And there's such a great group of people, especially you see them all at the International OCD Convention, that there's such a huge group of people that are being so loving and so kind and so giving and advocates to the people that are really suffering deeply. So there's such a huge community. And for anyone that is suffering from OCD, you don't have to suffer alone. There are many people that can relate and talk to you and share. And I just want to say, help is available, and life is too short to not reach out for it if that's what you need.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I agree. And I'm sure you found it when writing this book and doing the Soul Nutrients newsletter, is that definitely for me, when I've done this podcast, that's helped me so much, because well, a couple of reasons. It gave me a valued focus to put my attention into, but also it made me realize that, I'm not alone. There are many, many, many millions of people experiencing the very same thing, and that kind of community and unity, and also helping others kind of out of the darkness, so to speak, helped me pull my own self up as well at the same time. And it doesn't necessarily have to be becoming an OCD advocate. It could be merely helping out a soup kitchen, or working with kids with autism, or whatever it is, like just doing something, or just asking a stranger how their day's been, because you may be surprised to hear the answer, that some of them are going through more than we think. And because I think the common misconception, especially say on the London Underground, that everyone looks so miserable all the time, but you never feel that it's something really bad. You just feel maybe they don't like their jobs or something. But I bet if I were to talk to a lot of them, they've all got stuff going on in their lives. And I feel when you understand that, you realize that suffering to a point is way more common than we think it is. And I think there's some healing in that.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, too, when I decided that I wanted to get loose of the noose of OCD, was instead of saying, gee, I had all these, bad things, and, things didn't go like I would have liked or whatever, is saying, wait a second, I'm going to take all these ingredients and all these things that now make me incredibly mad, and I'm going to harness that energy and turn it into something good. So it's like, you know what, OCD? It's like you created a big pile of rocks, and I'm going to take those rocks and I'm going to turn them into something useful for other people. And, to be cliche, it is really taking lemons and making lemonade and saying, this is what I choose to do. I don't want to just say, oh, woe is me, terrible, terrible, but say, what can I do to turn this stuff around? And so the pain that I felt with OCD becomes more understandable to me, because I'm able to turn it into something good for other people. And it makes me go, oh, now I get why I had this illness just completely take me over. I didn't know that there was any good coming from it. And I think saying, hey, there's good in the bad, and extract it and do what you can with it. And when you are helping other people and you are having a loving spirit of a peaceful warrior, then you go, you know what, this is who I'm intended to be. And you know what, there's something good in everybody, and everybody has the potential to be a peaceful warrior, to be strong and be assertive, but also be at peace with yourself and offer peace to others, kind of like the Buddhist philosophy. All of that is available to everybody. It's not just select people. It's available to everybody. And it's not like you have to wait for it. It's literally right now. Right now you can make a choice and say, I want to move forward with the courage of a peaceful warrior. Even if you don't even know what that means, even saying those things are so powerful, because then you're telling yourself, you know what, I'm watching and I'm gonna change it up. We're gonna have a new sheriff in town. I'm gonna learn what a peaceful warrior is. And you know what? When I become one, then I'm going to help other people become one. And that's the best way to say, bye, OCD. Guess what? You didn't get us all. You didn't turn us all into, having just a negative experience. We're coming back and we're fighting with a vengeance. And all the advocates, what you do, Stu, people writing their books or sharing stories or movies or whatever, it's coming back with a vengeance and saying, hey, I want to have the spirit of a peaceful warrior and help other people have an expansive, beautiful life instead of a collapsed, restrictive life. And whatever that is, I want to learn to be that.
Yeah. Great way of looking at it. And I don't really want to add much more to that because I wouldn't want to do a disservice on that point. Okay, so in the book you used an image, which is an image of the Chinese finger trap. So for those that aren't aware of it, it's an annoying little toy. I say annoying because it's unbelievably frustrating. You stick either both your fingers in, or you and a friend does, and the more you pull away, the tighter it gets. So I guess, it'd be good to hear why that was in there and what it means to you.
Well, the thing that's interesting, the last international OCD convention that I went to, I was, checking out the different people that were there sharing their service or what have you. And there was someone that had a big, huge bowl of Chinese finger puzzles. And I'm like, oh my gosh, someone else knows the significance of this analogy. It's so, so important. And that is when you stress and pull and become tight, you actually keep the finger puzzle on you tighter. And the best way to have the finger puzzle loosen up is to stop pulling and to just relax. And that in relaxing, you can set yourself free. I've had people reach out and say, I want to make sure I'm doing everything right that I need to do so I get better with OCD. And it's just that rigidity. You go, whoa, 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 whoa. It's not about being rigid. It's about being supple, and it's about being loose. And Rick Hansen, who is a friend as well as an author and just a great guy, in one of the things he wrote, he talked about being a young boy, and he was swimming, and he got caught up in the seaweed, and he really freaked out because it was kind of binding around his arms, and he really thought I could be taken under and drowned. So at first he started fighting with the seaweed and really pulling and tugging, just like you do with the Chinese finger puzzle. And he said at a young age, he was able to see that when he relaxed and he just kind of let his muscles be supple and he stopped fighting it, that's when he got to freedom. And that so much is the method that I found for OCD, that it doesn't need to be tight and rigid. It's actually about breathing and being expansive.
Yeah, being fluid.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I love Bruce Lee. I was about to say, Bruce Lee. When he said, "Be water, my friend."
Yes.
I love that saying. You watch water. I was going to do I did do a podcast on it, actually. Yeah, literally all about that quote, and I was inspired because I was watching this river, and it was more like a stream, but there's this big metal object in the stream where people chuck stuff in. Anyway, the water was hitting it and going either side, going round it, joining up again, and keep going. And I thought, what an inspiring thing to see that water doesn't hit that immovable object and think, I'm stopping, I'm giving up. It adapts, it changes, it becomes fluid. It is fluid, you know what I mean? And it moves, and then it changes to what it needs to be to get to where it needs to be. And I thought, the more we can do that in life, be more fluid with our lives, the easier it will be.
Absolutely. And the more fluid you are and you can get out of your mind and out of your stress, like you had said, Stu, of greeting somebody and saying, "Hey, how's your day?" How soft and gentle that is, instead of, clenching your fists at the steering wheel, giving everybody, the middle finger. That it's like, obviously this person's having a very hard day.
Yeah.
And I don't want to just start every day aggressive, giving everything the middle finger. I'd rather like, hey, listen to music, chill out, find my groove when I'm in traffic, rather than have a conniption fit and start yelling and get angry about why I'm not at home cooking dinner and I'm in this stupid car. It's like, you know what? I am burning through my lifespan, getting so worked up. It's like, I'm in traffic. I'd prefer not to be in traffic, but rather than sit here and have the veins in my neck start pulsing and get a migraine, I'm just going to go with traffic. Here I am, traffic. I'm with you and you're with me, and here we sit and here we be. And it's kind of, not saying, well, just fold and collapse and do nothing. That's not the point. The point is, instead of so much resistance, just be in the flow like Bruce Lee. He's got wicked moves and he's so in the flow that there's so much to learn from him, or like your analogy of the water, and it's almost like a message from the universe saying, hey, water's to cleanse and water's to flow. And when you can work with your energy to cleanse and flow, well, then, man, you are, working with some good mojo.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so in your book, I really enjoyed the fact that you put so many quotes in there, because I've always been obsessed in a good way with quotes. I've always found they've been entire philosophies encapsulated in a single sentence or paragraph. And that's always amazed me, that I could read a quote and it can completely change my outlook on life in a good way. So, and I actually used to own a quote website. I got it built and stuff in 2011.
Oh, neat.
One of my biggest regrets is closing that down. Anyway, so I guess the question is, what are the 2 or 3 quotes that are kind of your favorites in life?
One of my favorite quotes is, if I can share it with you, I'll do a better job if I can actually read it to you, because this way I can say it in a way that makes sense. One quote by Tara Brach from the book Radical Acceptance is, fear is anticipation of future pain. And with OCD, fear is so predominantly why we're doing the crazy things that we're doing, just trying to get peace of mind. And understanding fear and saying, hey, I don't know what the future holds. There's uncertainty. And boy, there's a lot of regrets in my past, and I could just kind of stay dwelling in the past with all those ghosts. Or I can say, you know what? The place that I am here right now is now. And the way I look at life is, you come into this world in a certain year, then there's the dash of your life, and then there's the end of your life. And when you look at a tombstone, your life, when you're actually here, is that dash. And I don't want to be fearful of the future. I want to be living in the moment. And because I've dealt with OCD, and I think this is really important, anybody that has gone into battle with their own mind and has had the thumb of OCD holding you down, think about how resilient you are. Think about how tough and strong you are, because I don't know anything more intense than being in battle with your own mind. And if you can stop the battle, kind of loosen your fingers in the Chinese finger puzzle, or Rick Hansen loosening up when he's in the seaweed, when you can loosen up and be in the moment and not be in a moment that's leading you around because you're so fearful, well, that's really a great way to live. And that is that dash. And fear, unfortunately, controls so many of us and our actions, and it really need not be that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Actually, I remember seeing those quotes in your book, and I love Tara Brach. She's great. Okay, so was there another one that really stands out for you?
Yes, and this is kind of the this is why you press on and you keep going, is to have freedom and expansion and joy and peace and love. Because wow, that's something, and kind of what we're all wanting when it boils down. And this one I think is terrific. I'm probably going to say the name wrong, but it's Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh.
Yeah.
And it says, yes, it is better to look from the window than not look at all. But to look through the window cannot be compared to the windowless sky. And life has a windowless sky available and ready and wanting to be there for all of us if we can find our way to lean into it.
Yeah, very profound. Yeah, no, I like that. Okay, so got a few questions towards the end now. So you may have heard these before, but let's say you're in an elevator going up a few stories for about 30 seconds, and someone says, "Hey, I read your book. I have OCD. What advice do you have for me?" What would you tell that person?
I would tell them, thank you so much for reading my book. I really hope that there was value inside of those pages for you, that I laid out my pain and I showed you the darkness that I lived in, and I did my best to share the breadcrumbs that I found and discovered to lead myself out of the dark forest to a much lighter and brighter life. And even though I can't do that for you, and it's not a one-stop shop cure that everybody can take, whatever your route is to get to more peace and to get to more freedom and get out of your prison, I hope that there's something here that helps you whittle your key out of your prison. And that I sincerely wish love for everybody, because love so much is a huge antidote to our fear and our anxiety, and a huge part of us whittling our key that's going to fit the lock to get out of our prison.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so, if you could pick up the phone and call your 20-year-old self, what would you tell that 20-year-old Kirsten?
I would say that everything is going to be okay, because I never felt that everything was going to be okay. I was completely fear-driven. And if I would have gotten the, hey, I know something good about you, and there's something that's good to work towards, you will find it, I could have gone, okay, I can keep going. But I had such dark days that there was times I really didn't think I could carry on. So kind of lighten up. Don't be so serious. Life is just mysterious.
Yeah, I like it. And you got a billboard where you live. What do you want written on that billboard for everyone to see?
I would say, boy, that's a good one, Stu, because there's so many, just like you like your quotes, there's so many things that I would put on a billboard. But I guess it would be 3 words, and they would be here now.
Yeah. Ramdas? Is that, he wrote a book called that, didn't
Yes.
he? Yeah.
Yes. Ram Dass, exactly. And when my dad was, very intellectual and a sociology teacher, and he had the Be Here Now book, so I was exposed to it in the 1970s, and I was trying to grasp these concepts about being here now and stuff. So I didn't understand all of it, but I knew it had intense philosophic value. And I was determined to get old enough and learn enough to really understand what the heck this guy, was really trying to communicate. And I think it's profound in 3 simple words. That's really all we have, is to be here now, or to choose not to. And my message would be here now. And even if you're in a world of pain, fight your way out and get to a better place. And that's available to everybody. And it's not lofty, and it's not like you have to wear a big white robe and go meditating and go up to the Himalayas. That's not where it is. It's about daily life. It's about just being able to have some good moments and have some normal space and peace and love and joy, you know. And if you can figure out a way to have that within yourself and help foster it in others, I think your being here now is of great value.
Yeah, absolutely. And is there anything else that I haven't asked you that you wish you could have shared?
You know, I'm the type, later I'll think about it and go, why didn't I share this quote with Stu? Or gee, when I said that, maybe I could have said it better. Because after all, I do have OCD. So there will be that inner critic that'll say, oh, if I could, you know, do some of this over again. But the basic nature, and I have to give you this compliment, is that you're so open and grounded and wonderful and caring and loving that I know when I hang up this call with you, if I think of something, I just wanted to tell Stu one more thing, just one more thing, I know that you would take my call. And I've really shared, yes, this time with everyone who's listening, but I've gotten to know you and be in your presence and your welcoming spirit. And I'm excited to go to the next step of whatever that is. Hopefully I don't become compulsive and have to start dialing up England and sharing any bit of wisdom I think I might have, you know, forgotten.
Yeah.
But being open and communicative, I think, is where it's at. And that's everything about why your show is so successful, is because that's another book that I've read, is The Seat of the Soul. And Stu, I believe your soul is in a really great seat. And it's one that's welcoming and loving and kind and open. So if I had that feeling, I would say Stu will take my call.
Cool. No, thank you. That means a lot. And yeah, I believe there's not enough people who are open and honest. And I feel that if everyone could work towards that place, I think the world would be an unbelievably amazing rock floating through space. But yeah, that means a lot that you say that. So thank you. And likewise, you know, the whole idea of soul nutrients appeals to me massively, because I believe that we are organic beings, and we're ever changing, and we're always learning, and it's not about being rigid. So I appreciate that message you're putting out.
Yes, absolutely. And I want to thank you too for the opportunity just to speak and share. And I hope that something within our dialogue in some way can be helpful to someone that's on their personal journey of health and wellness.
So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed my chat with Kirsten, and don't forget all the show notes. And if you want to become a member, head over to the OCDstories.com. That's the OCDstories.com. Quick disclaimer, guys, this podcast is not therapy, it's not a replacement for therapy, and nor should it be. Please seek treatment from a trained professional. Until we speak, take care.